we are traumatized on a daily basis these days. And it's been my experience that dance is definitely a way to open the door for healing energies, for us to move forward and to just deal with what we're bombarded with on a daily basis. I chose traditional West African dance as the main part of that vehicle, just because of what I grew up with during my time when I lived in Washington, D.C. I was joking with Amy before we got online. I became a man in D.C. and it's very true in the sense that I spent 15 years of my life in D.C. Of that time, I was a part of a dance company, Conqueror West African Dance Company, that not just being in a company, but just being a part of a culture, a subculture of the African diaspora, taught me a lot. And it is those tenets that pushed me forward to get my master's degree from New York University in dance education, and which now has me teaching at Queensborough Community College.
How am I supposed to go after you? I'm like, how am I supposed to go after you after that? My name is Amy Andrieux, as Veronique said earlier. I am the executive director and chief curator at the Museum of Contemporary African Diasporan Art, aka MOCADA in Brooklyn. MOCADA is a 20-year-old organization, 20-plus-year-old organization now. We started off, actually, the impetus for MOCADA was our founder, Lori Kumbo's thesis paper. And she wanted to kind of explore, whether, an African arts museum could be viable to the community, the neighboring Black communities of Central Brooklyn, socially, economically, politically. And, over the years, we incubated at least over 100 artists from over 20 different countries, from Wangechi Mutu to Jamel Shabazz. So we are definitely a Black art space. And for me, I've been at MOCADA for almost 3 years now, which is interesting because part of that time was the pandemic. But for me, what MOCADA means is essentially, how do we connect the dots of the African diaspora? I like to say that whether you're in Brazil, Botswana, Berlin, or Brooklyn, and you identify as being of African descent, you are part of this African diaspora, because there's so many different definitions of what that means. So that's the majority of my work, that and inciting dialogue around the pressing issues facing all of our different communities around the world, whether it's NSARS or, Black Lives Matter here in the US, and other things we'll touch on, I'm sure, in this conversation. But I too spent a lot of time in DC. I went to Howard University School of Communications. Yes, I do. And, I am currently a professor at New School, Parsons School of Design.
Nice. So I guess
I was like, where do we go from here? Exactly.
Yeah.
Where do we go?
So I'm gonna set this tone right now because I just have to ask this question. So, like we shared earlier, a lot of the context for bringing you both here is that Carolyn and I both had the opportunity to speak with you individually. And, just considering your time in this field, right? One of the things that was very clear was that when you were stepping into your roles of leadership at your respective organizations, no one was really confused about why they were doing the work and who were they doing it for. Now, I don't know if you had some confusion at some point, but based on the conversation overall, we just were very clear that you knew who you were taking on your back when you came into this space to say, I'm going to lead Rhythm and Dance and Kofago, I'm going to lead MOCADA. And so just given that and knowing, what the titling of this talk is, I just would love to hear more from you just overall about what that experience looked like, the pluses and the minuses around what it means to be in a space of leadership and going in knowing who you're doing the work for and why, but then recognizing that the tools and the structures that you need to adhere to or be mindful of don't necessarily benefit that particular group of people, or don't necessarily cater to making sure that they have a seat at any table where you have to engage? It's a loaded question, but I think it's going to take us through the time. And,
All right, that's what I'm thinking. I was like,
I know that y'all can unpack it because
my notes, get my pen together so I can take notes.
But
I don't want to miss anything because I'm good at missing stuff, and I don't want to do that to the sis because she's good.
I mean, it is a lot. It is a lot. And so for Amy, what I'm thinking about when I ask Kevin this question is the fact that Kevin is like, I'm going to make sure that my business structure, like how I set myself up as a business is going, and how I have funds funneling through this space is going to allow me to do the work that I say I'm going to do. And Kevin, when I asked Amy this question, I'm thinking about Amy saying, I'm at an institution where the folks in leadership, the folks who I answer to, don't necessarily make the decisions or see that this is my community and this is who I'm doing it first. So I'm going to center a people first approach wherever I go, however I do it, and that's just what it's going to be. It doesn't mean we can't expand. It doesn't mean we can't do all these other things, but this is who it's about. And so if you each could talk about that from your respective experience and kind of, let's start the conversation there.
Okay, I'll jump in. I think my story with Mokata is very interesting because I wasn't planning to go work for Mokata. But that's not, I mean, it was, I think I told you guys about this, but that was supposed to be my year of yes, right? I've worked in corporate, I've been a journalist for 20 years, worked internationally, et cetera. And I came back to New York and said, I'm going to focus on my art, my personal art. And I started freelancing as a writer again, because I still got to pay my bills, right? And I reached out to everyone I know, or everyone I knew, including Mokata. And it was interesting because the immediate feedback, and I was reaching out to say, hey, I'm writing again, keep me on your mailing list, everybody. Mokata reaches back, the chairman at the time, is an old friend of mine, and told me about the state of affairs for Mokata. At the time, Mokata was going through this period of, let's say, transition, right? It wasn't in necessarily a good space, but I was inspired by it because I knew how important Black arts institutions are in general for the community. So I kind of put my personal dreams, goals, et cetera, aside and said, here's a strategic plan for the next 2 years. Do this, this is how I'm going to contribute. And one thing led to another. And then I was the executive director, kind of running this organization. But I share that story to say that what I find, whether it be in the for-profit world or the nonprofit world, is that a lot of our institutions or corporations are fledgling. They're in a space of instability and always kind of, for the most part, and I'm not saying everybody, is no cookie cutter situation here, but for the most part, I keep hearing the same conversations over and over that everyone, especially in the nonprofit world, that we're living fiscal year to fiscal year, or program to program, or donation to donation, or sponsor to sponsor. And there isn't like this long-term kind of strategy about how are we going to survive? And I think for me, that was what was important. And I think the way to do that is to think about the people as opposed to the money, because we've been doing the money approach first, and that doesn't work. It just keeps you chasing after the money. But if you focus on the people, the money will come. That's the way I believe. But I also think the other part of that is like the reason why we have to take a people first approach is because, there is a double mandate that, and I'm speaking specifically about Black arts institutions or institutions led by marginalized peoples or underserved peoples or, vulnerable groups, however you want to identify. There's a double mandate, right? There's the art, the practice of the art making, the performance, etc., the delivery of that material. But then there's also the fact that, our spaces are in many ways forms of mutual aid or forms of like we're community centers. I like to say that a lot of times about Mokata, being in the gallery is sometimes, I'm just talking to the people who live on the block, who are part of our community. And they depend on us for information. They depend on us for insight. Sometimes they just want to be heard, right? So Mokata becomes a platform for that. How do we have those discussions within our space? How do we open the doors to organizers, educators, artists alike, residents, as opposed to just focusing on art for art's sake? So yeah, I guess I think that's a two-part kind of conversation where it's like stability, right? How do we do the long-term planning, long-term strategic approach? And also the secondary, which is like remembering that what we're building is different. It's not going to be what the industry says it should be, because we have more at stake. We have more to give.
No, that's real. Oh man, you touched on a lot of different things. One of the things that resonated with what you said is the notion that the way that we build our organizations, it's a certain level of context. We build it for community, right? I always tell people, like, it was not my goal to start a dance company. It wasn't. But it's understanding that this work has to be done, understanding that sometimes you're driven by ancestry, right? To do this work. I remember, man, it was probably like, and I'm dating myself, I'm gonna really let people know how old I am. Back in 2003, right?
Stop it.
I was a young guy just getting into Washington, D.C. And I remember I would go to dance classes and I'm like, yo, I love this energy. But what can I do with this energy with a background in business management and information technology? How does playing a drum or dancing a dance or singing a song the way that I do, which brings me so much joy, be something that is integrated with what it is that I know and what it is that I went to school for, right? But it would take years for it to manifest, right? It would take years of, trial and error, years of trying to find my own voice, trying to be secure in who I was as a Black man, right? And being quite honest with everybody here, understanding that who I am as a Black man is something that I've just gotten secure with over the past 5 years, being grounded in my 40s, to really stand at a place where it's like, okay, now is the time to lead, right? So what does that look like? For me, the creation of my dance company, and I'll go even back, because one of the things that I didn't mention is that I'm the founder and executive director of Rhythm and Dance, which is a nonprofit organization that I started back in 2004. And it's really important that I mention that, because I started Rhythm and Dance when I was still in DC. And one of the things that I saw when I was in DC was that with all of the artists that I was working with, there was a management piece that was missing, right? That management piece wasn't necessarily about getting gigs. It was about, like, how do you pay your bills? How do you keep the lights on? What does that look like? How is it that you can be an artist but not be a struggling artist, right? So when I first started Rhythm and Dance, it started out as a website just trying to promote people's classes, let people know, like, hey, you can come to our website, you can find who's doing what and what class. It started in DC, then I got up to New York, and then it was a capacity issue. It was just too much information, right? After that, we took that part of the platform down. Then it became our arts management thing, where we started going to different areas and there were artists that needed help. And, we would help them out with writing grants, just getting funding and things of that nature. We really started to take off when I started taking trips to Haiti, right? And things of that nature. And just shining a light on the beautiful cultural sides of these different parts of the African diaspora, whether it was Haiti, Senegal, Nigeria, any place that we traveled. And it continued to when I was in grad school at NYU. And so after I got out of grad school, I was given an opportunity to go and work with another organization, Sesame Flies International. And they wanted me to help them produce a performance for Labor Day. And in us doing this production, there was this massive amount of human capital, right? Imagine getting 150 dancers, from all over New York. And it's like, okay, you have this, like you said, Amy, you got this one program, but what happens after the program is done? And so sometimes in our community, we don't think about that. We think about the here and now, the ask, what is being asked of us. And nobody thinks about, well, what do you do after that? So me being a professor at that time, I'm saying to myself, these dances that we have are raw, right? They love dance, they love Caribbean culture, but they need more like training. So I can't get them to all register at my college, right? We got time for that. So then COFAGO was created, right? And COFAGO was also created at the nexus of us finishing that project, understanding that there was a need to push further, right? And also understanding that there's an ancestral push, because my before we got on the road, my father, who was the founder of Sesame Flies, one of the founders, he passed away. And so he wanted me to come back to the organization. I was like, this is all him. This is all him doing stuff in the background. And it's like, I can't say no, but got to move it forward. So in moving it forward, one of the things that I do and one of the ways that I move with the organization is that it's very based on education. We as far as performances go, that's not the concern. The concern is about young people getting on the floor, getting exposure to teachers and professionals, my teachers, right? People who taught me, younger people who are out there that have some information to give to make them well-rounded dancers that understand that they can use dance as a form to go out into their communities and heal people. So, yeah.
You talked about a couple of things right there too. I'm like, wait, hold up, wait, stop, wait, can we talk about that part? Because I mean, what you're saying is you're talking about representation, and I think that's at the heart of what we do, right?
Yeah.
We become representatives of the things that can inspire, the things that the cultural values, the shared values of our community, right? And we drill it down in a way where in one aspect, we're creating the educational mechanisms for them, right? The vehicles to teach, to build awareness. But then in the other part is this idea of expression, and Black people need rest, Black people need play, and I think that expression allows us to do that too. And I think we've got to weigh them equally, Yep. I think we forget that sometimes. But yeah, you said something else too about, oh my God, I should be taking notes when you're talking.
Yo, I was when you were talking before, I'm like, where is my pad? That's the one for work. That's the one for school. I can't find my.
Exactly. No, but you were talking. Oh, that's what you're talking about, the ancestral work, that connection to the ancestors. And I love the fact that you have that connection with your dad in building this institution. But I'll take it a step further and say that what we're doing is not anything new. There are generations before us who came, right? So I like to liken it to the Negritude movement or Afro-Cobra. With you specifically, as you were speaking, I was thinking about Katherine Dunham and her trips as an anthropologist.
Listen, Katherine. Yes. Right? So you got Katherine Dunham, you got Pearl Primus,
yes,
like all of those, and so it's funny that you mentioned. For those of you that don't know, and I sometimes I don't want us to get into a cave of us just talking here. For those of you that don't know, Katherine Dunham is a sister that was born here in the United States, and she traveled the world, but went to Haiti in particular and used traditional Haitian folkloric dance to create a dance methodology called the Katherine Dunham technique. And it is something that is taught at the academic levels, and it is very, very instrumental in the work that I do. But within context, for every Katherine Dunham, you have a Pearl Primus. And so the reason why I say that, Pearl Primus was a young woman who came from Trinidad and Tobago, which is where my family's from. And so she came to the United States as a very young person and jumped right into dance, wanting to represent her people and her culture, got a number of awards and grants from the State Department to go to Africa to study African culture. And she used that information to come back and create here in this country. And their work is the bedrock of what you see a lot of in Black communities, particularly when it comes to theater performance, theatrical dance performance, stuff with respect to Alvin Ailey and things of that nature, but also the community-based stuff that you
Absolutely.
see.
Absolutely.
And so when you look at New York
Catherine.
City,
Catherine was
yes,
building policy in the 30s and
exactly.
40s and
You know,
50s.
and it was in a time where it's like, how dare you, Black person?
Right.
What do you think you're doing?
Exactly.
You know, so and come to find out, just dance lineage, it was so crazy. So I'm on the advisory board to my alma mater, NYU Steinhardt, and they have a graduate program in dance education, and they just got approved a new track in the African diaspora.
Ooh,
So yeah.
that's
So
good. Yeah.
but it brings things full circle because Pearl Primus used to teach there. You know
I
what I
didn't know
mean?
that.
I didn't know that either, and I went to school there. So you see, you know,
Yeah.
it's this work that we do is so multifaceted and multi-layered
And
in
we
the
need
sense
more of
that
us.
yes,
We need more of us behind the scenes.
indeed. And the beautiful thing is that I might be talking about dance, but dance is not separate from music. Music is not separate
Right.
from visual arts. Visual arts is
Right.
not separate from song when
It's
you're
the
talking about the
expression.
diaspora, because it's all part of the community. And I
Right.
think that that's one of the things that um, in the United States we're moving further and further away from, is that sense of community. It's all about the individual, especially coming from out of COVID, where we're just like isolated, put in a box. You can't do nothing. You can't go anywhere. What does community look like then, right? And so, you know, these notions of how community is supposed to be and what it could look like is something that definitely has to push us forward.
That's really interesting that you say that, because I actually think that COVID is our saving grace.
Oh, it is. Oh
Yeah,
man,
because
listen. I tell everybody, COVID, like I got a lot of blessings out of it. You know what I'm saying? I didn't get
right,
sick, but
right.
yeah.
Yeah, I just feel like, I agree with you. I think we were definitely on a trajectory culturally, and all of the industries that come from our culture was on a trajectory where, again, it was driven by money, it was driven by likes and clicks and all of that stuff. And I think COVID kind of put us in a scenario where we needed to collaborate more, and that's the old school way, right? Going back to the idea of the collectives, right? We needed to collaborate more and not see each other as competition. And then at the same time, right, not see each other as competition. And at the same time, rethink the way in which we're building our organizations. Do our organizations need the same 12 people that, like, in my case, like, do I need the same 12 people that the Met has? The same kind of, roles, or are my roles different? And what do they look like? What is really needed in the community? Let's ask the community what they need, as opposed to dictating, right? Yep. So I feel like now more than ever, I don't know about you, I feel like I'm in like 30 different coalitions now. And there are all these calls where I'm like,
I had to back out. I had to respectfully, man, listen. So I agree with you. I agree that COVID it forced us to think in different ways. But it was also a challenge for those who are used to dealing in certain traditional ways, right?
Oh, absolutely.
And so for me, I think COVID was a blessing for me because it forced me to grow up, and it also forced, and when I say me, I mean me and mine's, to do the work, right? Do the work on ourselves to prepare for what things are going to look like on the other side of this thing, right? And so in that space, for us as an organization, we had to stay very, very limber, right? So one of the things that we were used to, I'll give you an example. So we're based in Queens, right? We're based at the Jamaica Center for Performing Arts, the Jamaica Center for Arts and Learning, JCAP. And so we would have our events out there, but sometimes we would rehearse in Manhattan because we have dancers that come from as far as Yonkers to come to rehearsal. So Manhattan is ideal. So when COVID happened, we didn't have any space in any facilities. So we had to challenge people. So how are we gonna get together? Let's go to the park. Let's dance in the park and let's do what we need to do, because we need to be prepared for any events that can come up. No events came. We're in a pandemic, right? So annually we do a show that I call Kwanzaa Celebration, where I bring my students from QCC, my dancers from Kofago, and several other various different organizations together for performance. And we did it virtually last year. The beauty of that, right, talking about the creativity that comes out of COVID, is that we were able to highlight dancers from all over the world. Uganda.
Right.
I was able to bring dancers
That's true
from
diaspora
Uganda.
work.
Yeah, exactly. It takes it to another level. Haiti, the West Coast, all different parts of New York. We had people in like southern New Jersey, over near Trenton, like, hey, can we share this information out? Sure, you know. And so the notion, and this kind of brings me back to where I was when I first started in this art, where like I want to be able to be in a space to combine my passion, which is this work in the arts, with what I know about technology and business. And
Absolutely.
pandemic has been the space where it just comes together.
It also gave us time to reflect. It gave us time to say, okay, because a lot of our organizations, it's a lonely job being executive director. And a lot of the plate is full, like working 24/7, right?
Yep.
And there are times where I can't get to that because that's not a priority right in this moment. I got to focus on this right here. And I feel like the pandemic gave us the opportunity to say, okay, nothing else as big is happening. Let's focus on the things that we've been ignoring, because that's the key to our sustainability also, you know? Like, I really believe that. Like you mentioned at the top of the call, you were talking about the notion of the starving artist and it being, archaic. I agree with you 100%. So during the pandemic, I was thinking, well, in what ways can we kill this idea of the starving artist? How can we help to push policy to create some sort of basic income for artists? Insurance, health insurance for artists, anything, housing, studio space. How do we create this mechanism for artists, and how do we push at the federal level and say, hey, just like the farmers need, funding to sustain us with food, we need funding as arts and culture workers to sustain the people emotionally, spiritually, right?
Listen. Thing,
Like,
man,
right?
you hitting so many things. The thing that I hate,
Right.
anytime one of my mamas or my babas pass, we got to put up a GoFundMe to bury them,
Oh my God.
to do all of this stuff. Why are we not having these conversations with our young people now about life insurance, health
Yes.
insurance, mental health care, like all of these various different things? Because I really feel like the people in the community that are doing that artistic work, they're like our superheroes, right?
Absolutely.
But at the same time, somebody's got to be able to have that conversation. So I know like when we work with them at QCC, understanding that we only have 2 years with them because it's a community college, I'm very realistic and very honest about the notions of what your artistry is going to look like, right? And in looking at that, I want to introduce them not just to the dance, but I also want to introduce them to possibly being a photographer, possibly being a graphic designer or graphic artist, or going to be a dance educator, because you have to be able to supplement your art. And I think you have to be real about it. But whatever you're supplementing it with, make it something that aligns with who you are as an artist, right? Then after that, the larger conversation, I usually get this from students who are leaving their bachelor's, like they've probably gone through the process and they're at that point where they're about to go from their bachelor's into their master's, and they're looking like, what do I need to do? And they haven't had honest conversations about savings. They haven't had honest conversations about like insurance, like I was saying. And you have to sit them down and be like, look, we got to have these conversations so you don't end up like Baba over there, who needed this GoFundMe to make sure that they were taken care of and their family. And it's not like we're talking a lot of money, right? We're talking about a GoFundMe about $5,000. It's not a lot of money, right?
But some of our institutions need the same. I
Yeah.
remember during the pandemic, there were so many friends I knew who had organizations that had to shut their doors.
Yep.
Period. because again, we're living check to check, fiscal year to fiscal year. There's an organization out of Philly. It's called, and I might get this name wrong, but it's called the, what is it? The Village of Humanities and the Arts, or the Village of Arts and Humanities, something like that. But but it's an awesome organization, and their ED, you know, did the work, created a 10-year sustainability plan, where not only is it sustaining the organization, but it's also sustaining, I think it's like 100 jobs, 100 homes, 100 people. It's like insane. And now I look to that as a model. Like, how do we build that at Mokata? How do we build that at Rhythm Dance? How do we build that at all of our institutions so that we are here 25, 50, 75 years from now, as opposed to, damn, maybe if we get this grant, we might be here next year. Or maybe if we get this grant, we can give a little extra to these artists. Like at this point, we shouldn't be in this kind of like, what is that called again? The mouse wheel? Chasing,
Yeah.
you know what I mean?
Yeah,
like
yeah.
it's insane. And I thought someone else said something. Yeah, and I think that like that is what sustainability is to me. How do we create this ecosystem? Because we've already got the ecosystem, the foundation of that ecosystem in terms of how we create and how we move within community and share with community and are informed by community, right? So how do we take that ecosystem and expand it outward, where it's like, okay, now we're bringing in funding. So that funding becomes a part of that cycle, where it's like, we're helping to fund community, we're helping to fund artists, we're helping to support in a way where we're not waiting on, and I know I mentioned government before, but we're not necessarily waiting on government to shore us up every year.
Can I jump in here?
Sorry.
Yeah, sure.
So I just want to make sure that I connect these two dots that were brought up, because these are two gems. The question you just asked, I would love you to answer that question, but here's why. Because we talked about what it means to be moved by ancestry as well, right? And over the course of this conversation, we also talked about Ms. Katherine Dunham and Ms. Pearl Primus as well. And so what's interesting about the question you're asking now and what these folks have left behind, right? So for people who are not dancers, this conversation is not just about dance, right? But for people who are not dancers, Katherine Dunham went into these spaces and took of these spaces what already existed and brought it down to their fundamentals and said, I'm going to leave behind a dance technique that is about building foundations for how you will move through your body and then build to understand how to move through these rhythms and what these rhythms mean in connection to these other things. But it wasn't that brilliant in the sense that they already existed, right? Like you said, we already have the ecosystems. We already know how we create as artists. We already know how we do the thing. But the technique that she left became called the Katherine Dunham technique. It wasn't called the Haitian Jamaican Martinican technique.
Right.
Studied the thing.
Haitian contemporary, right? Like
right.
That's what it should. That's what it
should
be, right?
It was called the Katherine Dunham technique, and today, 2020, Katherine Dunham technique is an institution in itself. We won't talk about the institution, but it is an institution in itself that people pay money to learn these things, right? And so what I'm teasing out is that Katherine Dunham actually did the thing that you're asking, how do we do, right? How do we take what we create, what we already know we create, and then turn it into a source of how do we fund the thing? Right. So I would push that question back to the both of you to ask, you know, in essence, in short, what are you leaving behind at your institutions? You know, how do you do that thing at your institutions in terms of what are you teasing out structurally in terms of how Mokata operates, how rhythm and dance operates, that you know once you step away, no one can say that, you know, Amy didn't touch this, Kevin didn't touch this, you know. So what does that look like at your organization in terms of doing that specific thing?
I'll take this first. So one of the things that I do is everybody that comes to my organization know that it's not just about dance. You're going to get a little bit of business management. You're going to get a little bit of event planning. You're going to get a little bit of project management, you know, you're going to get that. And the reason being is because I can't do everything myself, right? And they look at me as Baba Kev, and Baba Kev is pretty awesome, yes, but again, I can't do everything myself. And the reason why I say that is because what I've seen and what I have witnessed over the years is this notion called founders syndrome, right? And the notion of founders syndrome is that you'll have people that start these organizations, but the starting, the founding, the maintaining, the implementation, the sustenance of the organization begins and ends with the founder of that organization. I've seen it so many times. And those same organizations either have a 3 to 5 year lifespan or the founder dies, right? And so because they're taking all of this emotional stress of making sure that this thing happens and moves forward. So to be more succinct with the response, my goal is to make sure that I teach these young people that I'm with how to live. And in order to do that, it goes beyond just, you know, knowing how to sing the song for Soli or knowing how to do the 5 steps of Sabah, right? It's understanding like, okay, you guys want to put on an event. What is your budget? What type of timeline are you giving yourself? Who's putting together the graphics for this thing? Who is getting the word out? Is it going to be a social media thing? Are you inviting these community organizations? Who's getting in contact with the schools in the local area? So it's somewhat of a methodology with respect to not only how can they approach with the work that we do, but how can they approach the work that they do in their own lives, right? And so in that space, I've seen a lot of the effect, if you will, right, of doing the work in our organization. I can see them doing it with themselves, and it's impressive to see them go through that growth period and that growth span. And it'll be something as big as an artist or one of my artists doing something, doing their own tour in another state or another country, to one of my artists calling me like, Baba Kevin, I'm doing this new choreography. I want you to see it. What do you think? Right? Simple. And in those spaces, that's where we are on a day-to-day. Now, to make sure that the organization is around after I'm gone, that's more of me planting seeds appropriately to make sure that that's done. I always tell the people that I work with and the dancers that I work with, I don't want them to be a part of this organization more than 5 years. And the reason why I tell them that is because I want them to go out and grow, right? However, if they want to stay, I'm not going to stop them, right? And the reason why I say that is because at this moment in time, I have dancers, 2 of my dancers went on leave last year because, no, yeah, it was last year because they had babies, right? So we got Kofago babies and rhythm and dance babies running around here now that just turned 1 this year, right? And so when I see their pictures online, I'm already thinking about, well, what's going to happen with that generation? Because 20 years from now, I'm not going to be here, right? Or I'm going to be here, but my knees, I'm not going to be able to get it like I can get it now, right? My hope is that the organization is still there as a community, right? And sustaining as a family, that it'll be something there when those young people get to that age of 18 and 19 and 20 years old, and they want to be in this culture.
Amen to all of that. You have my mind going now, and I think the first thing is commitment to Black excellence.
That hit me.
Yeah, no, I'm serious though. The reason why I say that is because, you know, first it's like, okay, let's all align. What is diaspora? Okay, we're all here. Okay, good. What is Black excellence? What does it look like? What does it feel like? How does it move? What is it, you know, what does it sound like, etc. Because I think some of us have, I can say many of us have internalized this idea that we are excellent while simultaneously kind of tearing down what Black excellence actually is. So I always want to align there and make sure that we understand that when we're doing this work, we can't come half-assed. We can't come 20% because our community deserves more than that. So we've always got to give our best. And if that means doing less so we can go deeper, then let's do that, right? Because a lot of people,
wait. No, that's
you
a
know what I mean?
gem.
Because
That's a gem.
we're doing a
What?
lot. Because a lot of times success looks like, let me do all these million things, and we don't have to do a million things. That was one of the first things for me at Mokata. It was just like, wait, what? I do all this? Wait, let's slow down a little bit and figure out what really drives our mission. Like, what is it? What do the people need? How do we marry those two so that they're in sync, so that one, our stability and that legacy is always there, because we're married to the community. The community ain't going nowhere, right? If it's about, oh, let me just make sure we have an audience is not the same as community. An audience is somebody who's passing by, might buy a ticket, versus someone who is checking in to make sure we're all right. You know what I mean? So that to me is a part of that legacy. This time I did take notes on my phone, so I'm going to my phone. I was like, this time, making space for transparency is another one. It's like what you were saying, like, yo, you know, sometimes there's founder syndrome and folks don't pass the baton with the information. Come on, share best practices. You've already made some mistakes. Don't allow me to have to go through and reinvent the wheel again, right? Share those best practices. So now I got the baton and I'm running the next leg of the race. It's still building on, you know, this shared community, this shared institution. But I think that going back to, you know, what I was saying earlier about the competition, we've got to get this notion out of our head that we're competing against one another to build this thing. Because what you do and what I do is connected. As long as we're both doing it, and it's helping to build community. You're in Queens, we're gonna rise. Yep. And that's to me, that's the reverberating sound of the diaspora. That's the I can't even say the word right now. Reverberating sound of the ancestors. You know what I mean? But the minute we get in this space of competing with one another, it's like we just broke it, right?
You're hitting on so many things.
Sorry.
Just one piece. Like you said something about the founders and them giving us those jewels. What I've seen, unfortunately, is a lot of people, like, ego is a hell of a thing, man.
Oh my God.
You know, and it's like it's so powerful. And I'll admit right here, my ego was big. You know what I mean? And it's one of the things that I'm thankful for is the elders that are in my life that will sit me down and be like, look, brother, if you're gonna do this work, this is what you got to do. But on the flip side, one of the things that I had to do is that I had to listen to the young people too.
Yes.
A lot of people listening to them.
Yes, absolutely.
Like, yo, like these young people, like when I'm doing stuff in Kofago, I listen to what they say because they out there in the streets. They're the ones that's going through stuff. One of the works that we did, one of our founding pieces of choreography, is called Daughters of the Moon. And the work was another reason why Kofago was founded, because when I was doing the work in the Caribbean community, I was hearing a lot of stories. This was at like the height of the Me Too movement as well. I was hearing a lot of stories about young women and men who were sexually abused, physically abused, and it was this revolving notion of them going to their loved ones, telling them what happened, but just being ignored, like, oh, it happened to me too, or it don't worry about it, or use a man, that shit don't happen, what are you talking about, right? So in that space, the choreography that we talked about, it was centered around that healing that had to happen, but these young people just wanted somebody to listen to their story. So we turned that story into choreography. And when we debuted the choreography, like, their parents were sitting in the audience and they were hearing this in this art. And it's like, well, I didn't listen to my young person, but my young person put this piece up. What does it say about me? So it's like they need people to listen. Like, and it's like that.
But not just listen. Sometimes, I mean, they need people to listen, yes, but they also need people to just give them opportunity. Like, here, do this.
Yeah.
You want to explore this?
I want to ask, I keep doing this to Amy all the time. We never have enough time, but I want to ask this question before I open it up to the people listening with us. We're talking now about recognizing that we're not always in competition with one another. How do you do that when your funding model does not encourage that? And everybody has to write grants for the same pocket of money.
And that's what I'm talking about. What if, because what COVID taught us was that we could come together as collectives and push doors down for money. If you take a look at what happened in San Francisco is a perfect example, how the Latinx artists came together and said, city of San Francisco, Bay Area, we need basic income for at least, what was it, like 1,000 or 1,500 artists? We need basic income for them, period. I can't remember how many artists it was. I might be exaggerating there. But we need basic income for these artists. Plus our institutions need this much to survive not only the pandemic, but what happens after the pandemic. Because this is how important our institutions are to our community. That was a lesson that we did not know before the pandemic. We did not know we could come together and say, can I get some money? But for all of us. Now knowing that, what's stopping us from coming together as a collective and pushing those doors down? What's stopping us? Nothing, right? So I actually see this as a huge win. I think this is the time where we do come together and say, okay, perfect example. So we have a program called Masters at Work where, because for me, yes, we're always focusing on emerging artists and how do we uplift them. But then there are these artists who are in the middle. They're not like at the top yet. They're not emerging, but they're trying to get this next project out or realize this next dream, this next leg of the vision. So we invest in them, right? 3 theater companies Black theater companies came to Mokata as a collective called Black Theater Mechanics. And together we became their fiscal sponsor, working with them to get grants so that they can continue to do this work. And then they're passing on the baton even further by working with theater students from HBCUs and professionals, Black theater professionals, and kind of connecting the dots and making a network so that there is a consistent pipeline beyond just waiting for someone else to give us an opportunity. Does that make sense? So it's like, there's so many different ways to collaborate, whether it's, I know that I have a 501c3 and I can be of support to another organization because sometimes our organizations need that support. So I'm going to step in that space of being a solution to them so that they can rise and do the work, right? Or helping artists individually, et cetera, et cetera. So I think that, or working with, I work with the Laundromat Project on this National Black Arts Coalition. So there are different ways to collaborate. And I think it's not one size fits all, but I feel like now is the time to collaborate. We can't listen to industry and fall for the okie doke again, where it says, don't collaborate. That's the same as don't stand on the corner together. Like y'all can't.
What I heard was disruption, and I'm just here.
Absolutely. And if you want to bring it back to Haiti, they told us not to come together either, and look what happened, right? Facts. So there's that.
Look what's still happening. That's another conversation for another time.
We will have that.
We will have to.
We'll have that conversation.
So for everyone who's in the crowd with us, who wants to ask a question, we are in the traditional Zoom platform. So please raise your hand or give me a little reaction if you have a question before unmuting and before it potentially gets really loud. And then our guest folk, please feel free to pick away. I think you can see everyone as well, right? With the hands up.
Well, can they show us their faces? Like I see Aisha's here. I had to call you out real quick.
Aisha.
Carolyn has a question.
Okay.
If someone does want to go before me, because I've already had like the pleasure and honor of speaking with you both, I can hold my question till later. But if not, I'm happy to ask now. So I'll go. Okay. So I'll just preface this by saying it's a little bit of a long explanation going in. I apologize ahead of time. But so I'm operating from the place that lineage, that we are our lineage, right? That we are our past, and we are the unborn, we are the future as well, and then we have an obligation to those, but that we are our dance family, kind of as Kevin spoke to, we are our arts family, we are our community lineage. But as Veronique was saying, when we seek funds, and you guys have touched upon already, like we can't keep going in this individualistic fashion. It's not sustainable. But I think that there's like an underlying issue around this, around the way we've been trained to form identity. And that then we're constantly being asked, even outside of the grant writing space, just in society, to seat ourselves someplace so very specifically that we can't actually function within that big lineage that we see ourselves actually as part of. So if that sort of singular restricted identity is is not sustainable, how do we rethink identity? How do we rethink the ways that we are told to accept the identity making process in this particularly hyper individualistic American capitalist space?
I was about to say capitalism.
And then,
yeah.
and then what are strategies for for positioning ourselves as something larger, and really kind of like, where do we start? And I think that this is like, I'm just looking at this as a foundational question, because it makes me think of, Kevin, and your operating structures for your organization that you have, as well as like what you say, like what you're teaching people. I can't be everything. I can share a lot, these pieces of what's going to make it work. And sort of, Amy, how you've talked about collaboration, out of working and reaching out across the globe to do work, but also looking at like, there's a space for corporate and philanthropic incorporation into things. So yeah, I mean, I'm asking a big question, like, how do we rethink identity and where do we start? But it's because I think it touches on all of these things. Sorry for going like deep down into the rabbit hole of philosophy.
Sorry.
I don't know if that's identity though. I think that's the main thing, because, well, I'll speak for myself. I don't know about you, Kevin, but I think we're aligned on this. But I think our identity is we're Black first, right? I think that's there. Like, that to me has nothing to do with the grant writing, all the other stuff. The other stuff, I think there is a system in play. And I think sometimes I'm excited about the fact that I didn't spend the last 20 years in this system, because I think it can be blinding. So, coming in with fresh eyes, it's like, well, I can knock that wall down. It doesn't matter to me in the same way that it matters to you. I don't have to uphold that idea. And I think that as long as we can educate each other, and that's from institution to institution, ED to ED, and not be afraid to collaborate, I think that is the way we change the system. But if we continue to kind of question and say, well, can we really do that? I don't think there's space to do that. Then we'll never know. And we'll just continue in this kind of, this hamster wheel. What was I saying before? Mouse trap? Whatever.
Hamster wheel, yeah.
Whatever it is. I don't know. What do you think, Kevin?
Well, I think you're right on track. I think that organization is key. Organizing and communicating is key. Like, I'm looking at the sis Kat Bloomfield. She said, we flipping tables in this beat, right?
Right.
You need that energy. You need that, because I think that you need that flipping tables energy, but you also need that energy that's going to create strategy too, right? So it's understanding that we need both of those energies working simultaneously to overcome a system that is not built for us to succeed. Let's be honest. Let's be clear about that, right? And so within that context, that's where it takes the right people to sit down at the table to discuss what and how we're going to be. And the reason why I say be is that we can talk about, attacking the system, restructuring the system, this and the other. The people that put the system in place are not going to allow us to deconstruct the system because it benefits them. Let's be clear, right? So yes, we can make noise and we can put strategies forth to make sure that we can get what we need when we need it. But we also have to be clear that we also have to be able to protect ours and protect our people and what it is that we're trying to create moving forward into that next generation. We also have to be able to teach that, listen, the work that we're doing now, like the work that Amy and we're doing right now, right? We understand that the end goal might be something that we might not see, right? We got to be really, really comfortable with that. And understanding that we live in a world, capitalism, where everybody wants to see results in 6 months, a year, 2 years. No, the work that we have to do and the structures that we're trying to modify or trying to change to the best that we can, no, not really realizing if we can, that's something that's going to take a long time to happen, because they didn't just come to be, they didn't just manifest. So we
Right.
have to be able to understand that we got to be here for the long haul.
But I also think we need to think about it differently in terms of funding, you know, because our organizations are different, because we have that double remit. Should I be going to, I mean, yes, Ford Foundation supports us, right? But like, should I only be looking at foundations to support
Is that
our,
the end all be all?
is that the end all be all?
Yep.
Many of us are like dependent on foundations and city money or state money to survive. But what if there was a basic, you know, cash reserve for all of our organizations? Just because we don't have cash reserves, we don't have endowments. What if there was just a basic for all of us?
Listen,
that would make, right?
Why are we not talking about crypto?
Hello?
Cryptocurrency. Like, so I love young people. I'm not trying to take this left, but we really have to be discussing and talking about different ways for us to create income, right? And so I had one of my young people was like, hey, Baba Kev, I gotta pull out, you know, I'm doing this crypto thing. And I'm like, oh, really? Tell me more, right? And I'm trying to see what it is that they're saying and see what it is that they're doing. You know what I'm saying? Because that's a whole world that I don't know nothing about. And that could be another way that we can generate money or generate income. Come to find out, there's that, like, the arts are going in that direction, you know, and so what does that look like? How can we have this open discussion as artists to see if, you know, Bitcoin and cryptocurrency is something that we should be getting into when we're talking about creating incomes and streams of revenue for our artists? Because we don't want that that's the end all and be all.
Because we're so, okay, like, I love us so much, and I love, you know, I love receiving the call from the ancestors to do this work, but we also have to remember, I can't remember who said it. I think it was Carolyn who was talking about, we're also connected to the future. We've got to talk about innovation, to your point. It's like, we can't just fall in line with what has already been done and keep doing it over and over and over again. We've got to open ourselves up to what's possible. How can we reshape this box? You know, like, I hear that a lot about, like, how I'm curating at Mokata. It's like, oh yeah, you're doing contemporary African, you know, art, but it's so different. And I was like, why? Because there's no artifacts. You know what I mean? Like, you know, so it's true. It's like, we can't be afraid to shake things up a bit. Sorry, Marla. Marla was like, damn.
You, Amy and Kevin, have any final thoughts that you want to share before everyone leaves?
I love Kevin. That's it.
Ditto.
I love Kevin.
Yeah.
Thank you.
And I'm serious.
Amy.
Let's collaborate.
I'm already thinking in my head. Okay, we're gonna get over to Brooklyn. I gotta get these kids over there. How does that look like? What does that look like? I'm already in my head. It's like so yeah, definitely. Thank you, Amy. Thank you, Carolyn. Thank you, Veronique, for pushing this necessary work forward. I think back to the conversations that we had earlier this year and how it is starting to manifest. And you know, Veronique, I already know how passionate you are about the culture. So, you know, I already know this project is in good hands. Carolyn, I follow you on Instagram. So I'm like, yeah, she about it. So I appreciate that. And so
she's quiet, but yeah.
In that space. So good. You know, but I look forward to working with everybody here and just pushing the culture forward.
Thank you.
Yeah, he said it best. All that.